Well, well, well. Look who's finally decided to peek behind the curtain. You know what's funny about secrets? They're like little time bombs, aren't they? Tick, tick, tick. And then boom, everything you thought you knew, scattered across the floor like broken glass. So you want to know about monitoring, do you? About watching, listening, collecting every little digital breadcrumb you leave behind. Oh, this is going to be educational. See, while you're busy scrolling through your feeds, liking cat videos, sharing your breakfast photos, someone else was taking notes, very detailed notes. But here's where it gets interesting, and I do love interesting stories. They got caught. The watchers became the watched. The hunters became the hunted. Isn't that just poetic? Makes you wonder who's really pulling the strings in this grand theater we call modern life. You see, there was this company. Oh, let's not name names just yet. That would spoil the fun. And they had this beautiful little operation running, smooth as silk, quiet as a whisper. For years they collected data like kids collecting baseball cards. Your location when you thought your GPS was off. Your conversations when you thought nobody was listening. Your browsing history when you thought incognito mode meant, well, incognito. The beautiful irony? They were so good at watching others, they forgot someone might be watching them. Surveillance is a funny thing. Once you start the game, everyone becomes a player. And in this game, there are no innocent bystanders, only those who know they're being watched, and those who don't. Now picture this scene. Corporate boardrooms filled with men in expensive suits, talking about user engagement and behavioral analytics. Such clean words for such dirty work. They had algorithms that could predict your next purchase before you even knew you wanted it. They knew your political leanings, your relationship status, your health concerns, your deepest fears, all gathered from the digital footprints you thought were invisible. But here's what they didn't count on: whistleblowers. You know what a whistleblower is? Someone who can't stand the taste of lies anymore. Someone who decides that truth is more important than their next paycheck. These brave little souls started talking, and when they talked, the house of cards began to tremble. Documents started leaking. Internal emails surfaced. Suddenly, all those privacy policies that nobody ever reads became very interesting reading material. Terms of service agreements that were written in language so complex, so deliberately confusing, that they might as well have been written in ancient Sanskrit, all designed to hide one simple truth. You were the product being sold. The interesting part isn't even the monitoring itself. No. The interesting part is how they convinced you to volunteer for it. They made surveillance feel like convenience. They made privacy invasion feel like personalization. We're just trying to give you a better experience, they said. And you believed them. Why wouldn't you? The lies were wrapped in such pretty packages. Smart homes that listen to your private conversations. Social media platforms that tracked your every click, every pause, every microsecond you spent looking at a particular image. Shopping apps that knew your spending patterns better than your own bank. Fitness trackers that monitored not just your steps, but your sleep patterns, your heart rate, your stress levels. All of it feeding into massive data centers, creating detailed profiles of who you are, what you want, and most importantly, how to influence you. And the consequences, they're just beginning to unfold. legal battles that will drag on for years, fines that sound impressive but are really just the cost of doing business for companies that make billions from your data. Congressional hearings where politicians pretend to be outraged while secretly taking donations from the very companies they're supposed to regulate. But the real consequences, those are for you to discover. Because once your data is out there, once it's been collected, processed, analyzed, and sold, it never really goes away. It lives forever in server farms, in backup systems, in databases scattered across the globe. Your digital ghost haunting the internet for eternity. The funny thing about privacy is that you don't miss it until it's gone. And for most people, it's been gone for so long, they don't even remember what it felt like to have it. To walk into a store without facial recognition systems cataloging your visit. To have a conversation without wondering if your phone is listening. To browse the internet without every click being monetized. You want to know the most beautiful part of this whole charade? They made you complicit in your own surveillance. Every time you clicked, "I agree," without reading the terms. Every time you gave an app permission to access your contacts, your photos, your location. Every time you chose convenience over privacy. You helped them build the cage that now surrounds you. But now the curtain is being pulled back. The magicians are being forced to reveal their tricks, and some of them are finding out that the audience doesn't appreciate being made fools of. The consequences are starting to stack up like dominoes, and when they fall, well, that's when things get really interesting. The question isn't whether you were being monitored. Oh, you were. The question is what you're going to do now that you know. Are you going to keep playing the game by their rules? Are you going to keep feeding the machine that turns your life into profit? Or are you ready to learn just how deep this rabbit hole really goes? Because what I've told you so far, this is just the appetizer. The main course is so much more. Revealing. The methods they used, the laws they bent, the boundaries they crossed, all in the name of knowing you better than you know yourself. And the people who tried to stop them, well, their stories are particularly illuminating. Let me tell you about shadow profiles. Oh, this is where it gets delicious. You know those people who proudly say, "I don't have social media." Those digital hermits who think they've escaped the net? Well, surprise. They had profiles, too, built from the digital exhaust of everyone around them. Your friends tagged them in photos. Your contacts synced their phone numbers. Your family mentioned them in messages. Piece by piece, pixel by pixel, these companies built detailed profiles of people who never even signed up. Imagine discovering that somewhere in a server farm, there's a file with your name on it, filled with predictions about your behavior, your preferences, your political leanings, your likelihood to default on a loan, and you never gave them permission to create it. That's not surveillance anymore. That's digital voodoo. They're building dolls in your image and sticking pins in them to see how you react. But here's where the story takes a beautiful, twisted turn. The very people doing the watching started getting paranoid about being watched themselves. Corporate executives began demanding their own data be scrubbed from the systems. Politicians quietly passed laws exempting government officials from certain types of monitoring. The wealthy started hiring companies to clean their digital footprints, while simultaneously investing in companies that collected everyone else's data. The Watchers were creating escape routes for themselves, while making sure everyone else stayed trapped in the maze. Do you see the pattern? Do you see how perfectly orchestrated this whole performance has been? And then came the hackers. Oh, the beautiful irony of it all. Companies that made billions collecting your data suddenly found their own databases compromised. Personnel records, internal communications, strategic plans, all of it spilling onto the dark web like blood from a fresh wound. The hunters became the hunted, and the hunted started fighting back. One particular breach was artistic. A major data collection company lost terabytes of information about their own surveillance methods. Internal documents revealed they were tracking children without parental consent, monitoring private medical conversations, recording intimate moments in smart homes, building psychological profiles to identify people with depression, anxiety, financial troubles. Not to help them, mind you, but to target them with predatory advertising. The executives tried to spin it, of course. Enhanced user experience, personalized recommendations, improved security measures. Such beautiful euphemisms for invasion of privacy. It's like calling a burglar an unauthorized interior decorator. The language they use to describe surveillance is almost as creative as the surveillance itself. But let's talk about the real artistry here. The behavioral modification experiments. Oh yes, experiments. You thought you were just using an app, but you were actually a lab rat in the biggest psychological study ever conducted. They would show certain users positive content to see if it improved their mood. They would bombard others with negative content to see if it increased engagement through outrage. They would manipulate your timeline to see if they could influence your voting behavior, your purchasing decisions, your relationships. The scariest part, it worked. They could make you angry with surgical precision. They could make you buy things you didn't need. They could influence who you voted for, who you dated, what you believed about the world. And you never knew it was happening because they made the manipulation feel organic, natural, like your own authentic thoughts and feelings. Some of the researchers involved in these experiments started having conscience problems. Funny how that works. They realized they weren't just studying human behavior. They were controlling it. They were digital puppet masters, and you were dancing on strings you couldn't even see. A few of them tried to blow the whistle and, well, let's just say their career prospects became very limited very quickly. The legal consequences are starting to pile up now like cars in a highway accident. Class action lawsuits representing millions of users. Regulatory investigations that span multiple continents. Criminal charges against executives who knew exactly what they were doing and did it anyway. Billions in fines that sound impressive until you realize these companies make that much money in a few months. But here's the beautiful joke. They're fighting the consequences with the very data they collected illegally, using your browsing history to predict which lawyers you'll hire, using your communication patterns to influence jury selection, using your psychological profile to craft their defense strategies. Even in defeat, they're still using the stolen goods. The international implications are where things get really interesting. Turns out, when you're collecting data on citizens of every country in the world, every government wants a piece of the action. Intelligence agencies were buying data from these companies to track their own citizens without warrants. Foreign governments were purchasing American data to influence American politics. It became a global marketplace for human behavior, and everyone's privacy was for sale to the highest bidder. Some countries started fighting back. Europe implemented regulations with teeth. Asian governments began demanding data localization. A few smaller nations completely banned certain surveillance companies from operating within their borders. But for every door that closed, 2 new back doors opened. The surveillance economy adapted, evolved, found new ways to extract value from human existence. The whistleblowers who exposed all this, their stories are particularly cautionary. Some faced years of legal battles. Others found themselves unemployable in their industries. A few received death threats from people whose entire business models depended on surveillance, staying in the shadows. The system has antibodies, you see. It protects itself by destroying anything that threatens its survival. But perhaps the most disturbing revelation is how deep the addiction goes. Not just your addiction to the platforms, their addiction to watching you. Company cultures built around the thrill of prediction, the rush of manipulation, the God complex that comes from having omniscient knowledge about human behavior. They didn't just collect data for profit. They collected it because they became addicted to the power it gave them. Employees described it like a drug, the ability to watch millions of people simultaneously, to predict their actions with frightening accuracy, to influence their decisions with subtle, algorithmic nudges. Some data scientists reported feeling withdrawal when they left these companies, like they were coming down from a surveillance high. The technology keeps evolving, of course. Facial recognition that works through masks, voice analysis that can detect your emotional state, eye-tracking software that knows what you're looking at before you do, heart rate monitoring through your phone's camera. The next generation of surveillance will make today's data collection look quaint by comparison. And the consequences, they're just beginning. Because the data they collected isn't just sitting in some warehouse gathering dust. It's being analyzed, cross-referenced, sold, resold, and weaponized by governments, corporations, and criminals around the world. Your digital fingerprint is out there, being used in ways you can't imagine, by people you'll never meet, for purposes you'll never know. The question that keeps me awake at night, and it should keep you awake too, is this. If they were willing to break so many laws, violate so many boundaries, lie to so many people just to collect the data, what do you think they're willing to do to keep it? What lines won't they cross to protect their surveillance empire? How far will they go to make sure the consequences never quite catch up to them? Because the game isn't over. It's just entering a new phase. And the next move, well, that's where things get really unpredictable. The unpredictable part. Some of them are trying to erase the evidence. Digital housekeeping on a massive scale. Servers mysteriously catching fire. Hard drives developing sudden malfunctions. Backup systems experiencing catastrophic failures. When you're sitting on evidence of the largest privacy violation in human history, accidents become convenient. But here's what they didn't count on. The internet never forgets. Every deleted email lives somewhere. Every erased document has a shadow copy. Every destroyed server had data synchronized to another location. The very systems they built to spy on you. also created an inescapable digital paper trail of their own crimes. Some of the most damning evidence came from their own artificial intelligence systems. The irony is beautiful. They created machines to analyze your behavior, and those same machines started analyzing their behavior. Pattern recognition works both ways, doesn't it? The AI began flagging their own communications as suspicious, their own data handling as irregular, their own actions as potentially illegal. Machine learning algorithms that were designed to predict your next click started predicting which executives would flee the country next. Behavioral analysis tools built to manipulate your emotions began identifying signs of panic in corporate communications. The surveillance state turned on its creators, and the results were illuminating. But let's talk about the victims, the real cost of this digital violation. Marriages destroyed because intimate conversations were monitored and later leaked. Careers ruined because private struggles with mental health became part of their digital profiles. Children targeted with predatory advertising based on psychological vulnerabilities identified through their online behavior. Elderly people manipulated into financial decisions that bankrupted them. The human cost isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in trust destroyed, privacy violated, dignity stripped away. They didn't just steal your data, they stole your right to be human in private, your right to make mistakes without permanent consequences, your right to grow and change without being forever defined by your digital past. Some victims fought back in creative ways. A group of privacy advocates started a campaign called Digital Pollution, deliberately feeding false information into surveillance systems, fake locations, fake interests, fake purchase histories. They turned data collection into a game of digital hide and seek. If you can't opt out of surveillance, make the surveillance worthless. Others took a more direct approach. Hacktivists began targeting the data brokers who sold personal information, not to steal the data, but to encrypt it and throw away the keys, making surveillance databases useless by turning them into digital graveyards. The beautiful symmetry of it all, using technology to fight technology. The most interesting development? Some employees at these surveillance companies started sabotaging their own systems from the inside. Database administrators introducing subtle errors that corrupted years of collected data. Engineers writing code that looked functional but slowly degraded surveillance capabilities. Quality assurance teams approving software updates that contained hidden kill switches. Corporate espionage became corporate resistance. The surveillance apparatus began eating itself from within. Employees who had spent years building these systems started systematically dismantling them, not through dramatic explosions or obvious attacks, but through slow, methodical, undetectable sabotage. The psychological impact on the surveillance industry has been remarkable. Data scientists suffering from moral injury after realizing the harm their work caused. Engineers developing anxiety disorders from constantly being watched by their own systems. Executives requiring therapy to deal with the paranoia that comes from knowing how easily privacy can be violated. The industry that built its fortune on studying human psychology suddenly found itself needing psychological help. The watchers became the watched, and they discovered they didn't like the view from the other side. Turnover rates in surveillance companies skyrocketed. Recruitment became nearly impossible. The surveillance economy began cannibalizing itself, but the consequences extend far beyond corporate boardrooms. Governments around the world are being forced to reckon with their own surveillance programs. Intelligence agencies that purchased commercial data without warrants are facing constitutional challenges. Law enforcement departments that used facial recognition without oversight are being disbanded. Military contracts with surveillance companies are being terminated. The political implications are staggering. Politicians who took money from surveillance companies are facing investigation. Lawmakers who voted against privacy protections are being voted out of office. Regulatory agencies that failed to regulate are being restructured. The surveillance scandal became a political earthquake that's still sending shockwaves through democratic institutions. International relations have been poisoned by revelations about cross-border data sharing. Countries that traded surveillance data are experiencing diplomatic crises. Trade agreements built on data exchange are being renegotiated. The global surveillance network that operated in the shadows is being forced into the light, and it's not a pretty sight. Some nations are going further than regulation. They're pursuing what experts call digital sovereignty, complete control over data generated within their borders. No foreign companies allowed to collect information about their citizens. No data sharing agreements with surveillance partners. Digital walls going up around the world. The technology companies are adapting, of course. They always do. New privacy features that sound impressive, but contain hidden backdoors. Terms of service that appear more transparent, but are actually more deceptive. User interfaces designed to make privacy settings difficult to find and harder to understand. They're betting that people will forget, that the outrage will fade, that convenience will triumph over privacy once again. They're probably right. Most people have the attention span of a goldfish when it comes to digital rights. Today's scandal becomes tomorrow's footnote. But some things have changed permanently. A generation of young people who grew up being surveilled now understand the true cost of free services. Privacy advocates who were once dismissed as paranoid are now being taken seriously. Lawmakers who ignored digital rights are now writing comprehensive privacy legislation. The surveillance economy is learning to adapt, but it's also learning that there are limits to what people will tolerate, boundaries that can't be crossed without consequences, lines that, once crossed, change everything. The most important question isn't what happened. We know what happened. The most important question is what happens next. Do we rebuild the internet with privacy as a fundamental right? Do we create technology that serves humanity instead of exploiting it? Do we demand digital dignity as fiercely as we demand physical security?